Have you ever been at the racetrack? You're having a great day, the sun's shining, everything's brilliant. But your car just feels like this. It won't turn. You're on full lock in every corner, but the thing's just understeering. Well, hopefully in this video, I'm going to have some answers to give your car so much steering that you'll be scared to turn the steering wheel. So let's get straight into it with point number one. Okay, so the first thing you can try is cutting down the rear wing. So kind of where we left off in the last video. But yeah, especially for high speed corners, this one, if you haven't got enough steering, trimming more out of the back of the wing is going to keep more weight on the front tyres, less weight on the rear tyres, and it's just simply going to have more steering, especially in the fast corners. Now, you can also trim down the sides of the wing if you really need more rotation. That will probably work quite well in even the slower speed corners as well. So yeah, just think about the rear wing. It's not something people really think about. You kind of cut it out to the line and just leave it. But you can mess with it. It is a great big air dam at the back of the car, acting to stop it from turning. So if you mess with it, it's going to affect how your car steers. So that's the first point. Okay, so the second point is getting the front tyre right. This is definitely the most important out of all of the points, because if your front tyre is wrong, you are going to go wild on your setup and your car's going to be doing all funky things and the tyre just isn't gripping the track and you're going to end up slower and it's just not going to work. So yeah, it's the part of the car literally touching the ground at the front, so it's the bit responsible for giving you steering. So obviously you just want to get the right tyre. If the front end has no grip, you aren't restricted to what you have. Well, at some meetings you are, but if you're not, then try different tyres or even modify the tyre that you have. So like with the cut staggers we've been running, we've all been gluing them down this year at the nationals and that, and it's just given everyone more steering, just more steering in the corners, more direct, and that has then allowed us to tune the setup back to a more normal window and make the car just much faster and better to drive. So getting the tyre right in that instance has been a very big help. There's also times like at the Euros last year where we ran a completely different tyre to everyone else and it just worked. We, instead of tuning the whole car to get more steering, we just found a tyre which steered and bang, the car was awesome. So yeah, definitely the most important one. The first place to look should be getting the tyre right, and then once you definitely believe you're on the right tyre, then you can start making changes to tune the balance of the car. Alright, so next one is going to be softening the front end or stiffening the rear end. Effectively changing the balance so that the front is going to be softer than the rear. So a few ways you can do that. I don't really mean by oil, I kind of mean by springs. So either softer spring or softer roll bar if you're running roll bar, say on a four-wheel drive. Usually softer front or stiffer rear, that is going to give you more steering because the front end tyres are going to be more equally loaded and the rears will be different. So they'll just want to slide around more and the fronts will have the best chance to grip. So that's kind of that one there. This usually always works. There are some weird conditions where if you say stiffen the front end up, it can actually make the car a lot more darty. And if all the corners are short, like quick changes of direction, it can feel like you have more steering. But generally, say you're going around a long sweeping corner, your car's going to hold the corner a lot more if you have a softer front end. It may not dart in as much, but it's definitely going to hold more mid-corner and exit steering with the softer front end or stiffer rear end. So yeah, so that's that one. Okay, next one, steering plates. So for the two-wheel drive, we've got the +1 plates, which come in the kit, those little carbon steering plates, but Associated also make the old zero steering plates. Now, we actually use these sometimes because we find that they just can give the car much more steering in the slow speed corners, or like not slow speed, but tight corners. Almost the corners where you really need the turning circle from the car, because what they do is they actually reduce the acumen a little bit, so the outside wheel can just turn slightly more in the corners. And yeah, that just allows you to have a slightly tighter turning circle and just more steering in the tight corners. The slight caveat to that is it's easier to then overload the tyre in, say you've got a long sweeper at the end of the straight. If you then go on full lock, you might actually sort of overload the tyre more and just push. It's easier to do that. So if you're driving well and you're just, steering the right amount for all the corners, you're probably going to have more steering everywhere. But yeah, especially for these in the super tight corners, generally, the 0 steering plates over the +1s are always going to give you more steering. Now, also, on the 4-wheel drive, there's now the 0, the +1 and the +2 plate. So if you're running the +1 or 2s and you want more steering, you can go down to the 0s to get the same effect I just talked about. Also on the 4-wheel drive, what you can do is you can cut the hub down or Dremel the hub so that it's flush with the steering plate. And what that does is just give the car more lock. Now we run that everywhere just because in the tight corners, it gives the car that more turning circle and just tight corner steering. So that's we run everywhere. That's something you can mess with. Also, if you are just struggling for steering in tight corners, it might be worth just checking your steering lock on both cars, because it's easy to just have said it a while ago, not checked it, changed something, and then you're not actually reaching the full end. So for tight corners, you can go to a shorter steering plate, check your steering lock, things like that, and that should help you out. Another change that we specifically like to do when we are lacking steering is, it's kind of two changes at once, but they work together really well to give you more steering. So this is something that really works, especially with cut staggers or when you're on a tyre that's digging into the surface. This seems to work really well. So what we do is we would lower the inside link by 1 mil or 2. So you drop that link and then you lower the hub at the same time. So what that does is you kind of keep the roll center of the car in the same place. So that doesn't technically change, but you actually change the amount of camber change, and you kind of change how all the forces in the arms and links are as well, and lots of complicated stuff. But it just generally gives the car much more steering when you do that. So yeah, just to reiterate, you're going to drop that link, and you're going to drop the hub at the same time, and just sort all the bump steer out, make sure that's all normal. And that is often a change that's just going to make the front end feel much more aggressive and just feel overall like you have more steering. It kind of works the opposite way as well. If you want less steering, if your car's kind of feeling really edgy and you just want it to be much smoother over the bumps, that can be a really good one to do, where say you raise the hub by 2 mil, raise the link by 2 mil, and that's something we've done before that can just really feel like it just calms the front end down a lot. So yeah, that's a good one to play with. Another thing you can do is you can mess with the anti-squat on the toe-in. So this is kind of another double change at once, which we sometimes do. So when you increase the anti-squat, to me it always feels like you just lose side bite off power, but when you're on power, your car wants to drive in a straighter line. So you kind of lose rear traction off power. And then with the toe-in is almost the opposite, where your car rotates a lot more on power when you reduce the toe-in. So what you want to do is reduce the toe-in and increase the anti-squat at the same time, and that will just overall feel like you've loosened the rear end off a lot. So the rear end will just rotate a lot more freely in the corners, and you're going to get through the corner and out the other side faster. So yeah, one kind of tunes it more into the corner. So the anti-squat, with more anti-squat, you're going to loosen it off into the corner a lot. And with less toe-in, you're going to loosen it off coming out of the corner a lot. So depending where you're struggling, you can kind of choose which one to tune. If you just generally want to loosen the rear end off, you can do both together, or you could even try and do something else just to loosen the rear end off to give you more steering. But that's another thing to think about, is often it's not a problem with the front end. You could just have too much grip at the back and you want to fix that somehow. Right, the last one to mess with is the weight distribution. So you can do this in a few ways. You can change steel versus alley bulkhead. You can move the battery forwards and backwards, things like that. So yeah, that's another one to mess with. This especially affects the mid and exit of the corner. It makes the car act so much more over the front, and it really, when you move the weight forward, the car's going to kind of dive in a lot more at the front, and then as you pick up the power, that weight is going to stay on the front end, and rather than lifting up and understeering, that weight's just going to stay there on the front end and keep the front tyres planted into the track as you want to accelerate out of the corners. Sometimes moving the weight forward can very slightly reduce your initial steering, so it's not going to quite change direction as quickly. But often when the weight's at the back, the car can kind of feel like it quickly reacts into the corner, and then it's just sat back and it just doesn't want to steer. Whereas when you've got the weight forward, it's kind of calmer into the corner, But when it really gets in there, it's just going to carry on turning the whole way, and it's really going to just carry you through the mid corner and exit of the corner. So yeah, usually moving the weight forward is going to result in a feeling of more overall steering. So that's definitely something that you should try as well. So that's it for this video. That's all of the points that I can come up with to give you more steering, what I would do if I was struggling for steering on a race day. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.